Banking license. In order to open your own bank or provide services similar to one, you must get the proper license. Obtain a banking license. Step 1. Contact the Commission of Banks or the State Division of Banks in the states in which you wish to open branches. The name of the organization varies from state to state, but each state has a special group that oversees banking and the related licenses. This office will be able to provide you with an application and list of state-specific requirements. California Financing Law, contained in Division 9 of the California Financial Code, commencing with Section 22,000. Financial Code 22,000 et sec. Requires the licensing and regulation of finance lenders and brokers making and brokering consumer and commercial loans, except as specified, prohibits misrepresentations, fraudulent and deceptive acts in connection with making and brokering of loans, and provides administrative, civil, injunction and ancillary relief, and criminal remedies for violations of the law. Effective October 4, 2017, the name of the California Finance Lenders Law changed to the California Financing Law. ASSAM. Bill Number 1284, 2017 to 2018 Reg. Sess. 4. The regulations under the California Financing Law are contained in Chapter 3, Title 10 of the California Code of Regulations, commencing with Section 1404, 10 CCR 1404, et sec. A finance lender is defined in the law as any person who is engaged in the business of making consumer loans or making commercial loans. A finance lender's license provides the licensee with an exemption from the usury provision of the California Constitution. There are a number of non-loan transactions, such as bona fide leases, automobile sales finance contracts, Rees-Levering Motor Vehicle Sales and Finance Act, and Retail Installment Sales, UNRU Act, that are not subject to the provisions of the California Financing Law. In addition to requiring a license for certain lending activity, the California Financing Law requires a license for certain brokering activity. A broker is defined in the law as any person engaged in the business of negotiating or performing any act as broker, in connection with loans made by a finance lender. A broker license authorizes brokering of loans to licensed finance lenders. It does not authorize brokering of loans to those who are not licensed finance lenders. The requirements for a license are set forth in California Financial Code Section 22,100, et sec. The law requires applicants to have and maintain a minimum net worth of at least $25,000 and to obtain and maintain a $25,000 surety bond. In general, principals of the company may not have a criminal history or a history of non-compliance with regulatory requirements. Who is required to obtain a finance lender's license? In general, any person engaging in the business of a finance lender or finance broker is required to obtain a California finance lender's license. It should be noted that the California Financing Law contains a number of exemptions for persons licensed by other regulatory agencies. Definitions. Finance lender includes any person engaged in the business of making consumer loans or making commercial loans. Finance broker includes any person engaged in the business of negotiating or performing any act as broker, in connection with loans made by a finance lender. A broker license authorizes brokering of loans to licensed finance lenders. It does not authorize brokering of loans to those who are not licensed finance lenders. Do I need to authorize my branch offices through an MLS? This license is required for all locations, other than the main office identified on the California Financing Law license that conducts business with California consumers. All branches of companies engaged in making or brokering loans secured by residential real property will be required to obtain a license through an MLS. Details about branch information on NMLS. New application. Non-residential and commercial lenders and brokers will be required to be licensed under the California Financing Law, but will continue to apply directly to the Department of Business Oversight.
That boy dressed up like you Santa and took pictures with your kids.
We the best, we will cut a frowny face in your chest, little wench. I'm unmentionably fresh, I'm a mensch. Get correct, I will walk into a court while they wreck, screaming, yes, I am guilty, motherfuckers, I am death. Hey, you wanna hear a good joke?
Nobody speak, nobody get choked.
Most state legislatures in the United States ban general corporations from accepting bankers' deposits, which covers any service where a general corporation acts as a funds drawee that transfers current funds, i.e., credit payable upon demand, to make payments as a substitute for coins on behalf of an account holder. Historically, in some states, this ban did not extend to a sole proprietor acting as a banker. One argument for justifying the policy of requiring banking licenses under the U.S. Constitution is that bankers' credit sometimes interferes with the regulation of the value of coins, and therefore it is necessary and proper to make laws which regulate banking. U.S. states tend to include a license to conduct the banking business as part of the standard terms of the corporate franchise in the state bank charters of incorporation. The license may be implied by a reference in the charter application to the bank being created under the state banking law. Federal depository institutions such as national banks or federally chartered credit unions derive their authority from federal statutory charter law. Opening or operating a bank also requires regulatory compliance, which may include Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation (FDIC) approval for coverage and opening an account at a Federal Reserve Bank or otherwise establishing a facility to settle checks via settlement with Federal Reserve Bank issued credit. If a bank wishes to perform any substantial fiduciary services, such as trust department services or acting as a securities holding intermediary, then the bank must apply for an additional special license for trust powers. Depending on the specifics of the bank charter, these licenses are available variously from FDIC, Federal Reserve Board of Governors, or state regulators. Another option for such a bank is to create a state-chartered trust company and hold it as a subsidiary corporation.
You can open a bank. Starting your own bank is laborious but profitable. By John Churchill. September 1, 2009. The financial crisis may turn out to be a blessing for Michael Wagner, a 37-year-old financial advisor with Joseph Gunnar Co, a broker/dealer based in downtown New York City. Wagner is in the process of opening 2 nationally chartered banks, one in Nassau County, Long Island, the other in upstate New York. In the current environment, it can take about 2 years and $2 million to find qualified organizers, management and get approved by government regulators. And before you take in depositors' cash, you have raised millions in seed capital from investors. And yet, despite the credit crisis, this is the ideal time to start a bank. Or so say the people who help people start banks. The events that literally shook the foundations of the financial system hardly need repeating. And while the news has brightened recently, we may still be facing a procession of regional and community bank failures. In fact, 77 banks have failed this year through mid-August, 24 of them in July alone, and that marks the highest bank failure rate since 1992. The majority of this year's bank failures are small to regional in size. At the big banks, 19 of which control 91% of the nation's $13 trillion plus deposits, continued negative press chronicling bank misdeeds, and poor judgment is hurting their reputations. Those troubled assets TARP was supposed to take care of. They are still there. $657 billion worth at the 19 largest banks, according to the Congressional Oversight Panel, COP, the committee that oversees TARP and other government efforts to stabilize the financial system. It's no better at the smaller firms. Portfolios of commercial real estate and construction loans are undermining long-standing regional and local banks. A report from COP says a worst-case scenario of losses from these loan types may reach $81 billion across 700 banks. Others project $100 billion in losses at 900 banks, the report notes. Amid the carnage, Wagner sees a marketplace ripe for strong new entrants. And so do bank analysts. Think of what you can do with a clean balance sheet, sound lending and real customer service in this environment, says Wagner, who recalls that not a single person in the local branch of the large bank where he used to hold a 7-figure account balance knew his name. He foresees launching a bank where customers know the staff and vice versa. He also sees his bank making sound loans to small business owners, those with less than $100 million in revenue. That's the vision. And if the economy is truly bottoming and a recovery, however tepid, is in the making, small businesses will ultimately be the engine that drives that recovery. Wagner is not the only one who is bullish on banking. Gerard Cassidy, managing director of bank equity research at RBC Capital Markets, calls it the best time to start a bank. But Cassidy is also clear that his assessment comes with some big ifs attached. Making sure he has those ifs covered is why Wagner hired a consultant to guide him through the bank opening process. Although Wagner has been on the financing side of bank startups before, he helped raise $26 million to capitalize USA Bank in Port Chester, New York, in 2005. The process of opening a bank is quite a bit more complex than merely raising funds.
Start pumping your bunions, I'm coming, I'm the dumbest. Who flamethrow your fuck shit, the Funyuns. Flame your crew quicker than Trump fucks his youngest. Now face the flame fuckers, your fame and fate's done with.
Charlie Brown, with Snoopy. I still remain that dick grabbing slacker that spill the wookie. Cause the total of the toolie will murder you friggin' moolies. Fuck out of here. Yeah.
Among the questions that a consultant can help answer: is there a need for a bank in your market? Is proposed management experienced? And do they have untarnished reputations? Are the organizers and directors reputable, with strong relationships in the target marketplace? Can sufficient capital be raised from an investor population wary of financial institutions? And, finally, is all of this solid enough to get regulatory approval from an overburdened, skeptical regulator? Wagner thinks he can do all those things, but not alone. If he's done his homework, he will eventually be approved, say attorneys, but it could take around 2 years. Phasing in success. Currently, Wagner, a native of Melville, Long Island, is in phase 1 of what Hudson says are the 5 phases of starting a bank. He's one of 25 people in the organizing group for a bank planned for Nassau County, Long Island. Hudson describes the Nassau Bank to be as a commercial bank with certain specialty financing products, such as insurance premium financing, that caters to high net worth individuals. No exact location has been chosen yet. That will be decided after an analysis of the bank deposits in the various zip codes, competition from other banks and other demographic research that will go into the overall business plan that is part of the official application to the OCC. Wagner and his organizing group are also in the process of selecting the C-level management, another critical step. Hudson will be in charge of recruiting and providing the organizers with a number of choices. Our goal is to find people who match the business plan with their experience, but also have clean records, and will be approved, he says. For added oomph, Hudson employs 2 former OCC deputy controllers. All senior executives, from the CEO, CCO, Chief Credit Officer, COO and CFO to perhaps even a Chief Technology Officer, need prior experience in those roles at accredited banks. What makes this especially important and difficult is that there's a shortage of people that fit that description, says Ed Carpenter, founder of Carpenter & Company, a private equity firm that is classified as a bank holding company, one of 4 such firms in the country. If you don't have management lined up, don't get started, warns Carpenter. Carpenter & Company is the largest player in the bank consulting space, having launched more than 715 banks in the past 33 years. When management has been sorted out, Wagner will be officially ready for phase 2. The application phase. The OCC, along with the FDIC, are in charge of approving applications for national charters like Wagner's. But that's a long way off. 9 to 12 months, says Hudson, and Wagner knows how important it is just to get the right people involved and committed to the organizing group. That's because he's been here before. He and a client of his from his days at Laidlaw & Company, a person who was also involved in the USA bank financing, were well into phase 1, with a bank planned for Rockland County in upstate New York. Hudson approved the location and the organizers, many of whom were cohorts of Wagner's client and well-connected members of the target markets community. Indeed, all 17 seemed committed and ready for the long haul. But Wagner says he quickly realized only a handful wanted to be part of building the bank, the others just wanted to invest and come along for the ride. Currently, Hudson says he is helping find a more committed group of organizers for the Rockland County Bank. Dan Hudson, founder and CEO of Newbank. According to Hudson, getting the organizing group right is essential. It is this group of 24 or so individuals. Bankers, a CPA, lawyers, doctors, a religious leader, others with deep financial and social networks in the community where the bank will be located, that will determine the success of the IPO and business thereafter. These are the people who will bring you the 600 to 1,200 investors when the bank goes public, says Hudson. And those shareholders will bring 3 friends over the next year or 2. So the ability and connections of those people are crucial. So much so that Hudson says he will happily dismiss a client if he feels the organizing group isn't good enough. According to Hudson, taking the bank public is largely an issue of practicality. There's no liquidity in a private deal, he says. Wagner hopes to raise $30 million in his bank's IPO. Typically, Hudson's fee for service is around 5% of the money raised. Because of regulatory rules and the fact that Hudson does not have a B/D, he cannot say what his exact fee will be. We've never had a bank fail, and we've never failed to open, boasts Hudson, a claim that he includes in his marketing materials. But besides finding qualified management, there are a lot of people out there who have succeeded in blowing up their banks. Wagner still faces the formidable tasks of raising capital and attaining regulatory approval. James Rocket, a partner at Bingham McCutcheon who works in the firm's San Francisco branch and specializes in bank startups, says Wagner's right. Starting a bank in this environment could be an enormously successful venture as the economy heals. But the current period reminds him of the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the government was still trying to clean up after the savings and loan crisis. Investors were shell-shocked. Nearly 600 banks failed between 1989 and 1991. Rocket remembers not having a single bank open in California between 1989 and 1994. I think you are seeing the same reluctance now to devote capital to banks, he says, adding that some clients have told him the impression they've got from the FDIC is one of discouragement for new bank applications. It's easy to see why. According to the FDIC, 305 banks were on its list of problem institutions at the end of the first quarter, with expectations of failures to cost it $70 billion through 2013. The more than 70 banks that have failed this year have cost the FDIC more than $12.5 billion, cutting its reserves to $13 billion. To combat this, FDIC asked Treasury for emergency funding at the end of the first quarter and recently raised deposit insurance rates on all banks. Small banks say the insurance rate increase is unjust and harmful to balance sheets, but given the FDIC's position, a rate increase could become a regular occurrence, say bank analysts. Still, if you have those critical elements, the business plan, management and capital raising ability, it's a great time, says RBC's Cassidy. You can pick and choose your customers, charge wider spreads, and you don't have the burden of the credit problems facing banks that are up to their eyeballs in bad CRE and construction loans.
Nobody speak, nobody get choked, hey. Nobody speak, nobody get choked, hey. Nobody speak, nobody speak. Only facts, I will shoot up, baby duck if it quacks with a Ruger. Top billing, come cops and villainous shots is block shipped out and bought and y'all feeling it. Killing it, killer Mike killing shit.
What more can I say? We top billing it, valiant without villain it, vicious and found victory. Burn towns and villages, burning, looting and pillaging.
Murderers try to hurt us, we curse them and all their children. I just want the bread and bologna bundles to tuck away. I don't work for free, I am barely giving a fuck away.
So tell begging Johnny and mommy to get the fuck away. Yo, here's a gun, son, now run, get it the gut away.
And it's formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
Master my negative energy mind. Rip up my hair just to see what's inside. I got my blade and my witch at my side. Astral projections are ruining my life because I cannot focus on anything else in my life. Never let knuckles up high. Spinning her mouth while she looks in my eyes. I am controlling the mind. Hey, what's up? Fake fuck. I got blades, truck, warlords, mohawks, warlock. Hey, what's up? Say what's up.
Hawking is formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
Hawking is formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
And it's formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
Master my negative energy mind. Rip up my hair just to see what's inside. I got my blade and my witch at my side. Astral projections are ruining my life because I cannot focus on anything else in my life. Never let knuckles up high. Spinning her mouth while she looks in my eyes. I am controlling the mind. Hey, what's up? Fake fuck. I got blades, truck, warlords, mohawks, warlock. Hey, what's up? Say what's up.
Hawking is formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
Hawking is formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
And it's formidable. My mama's stuck in Andromeda. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up, hop on my coffin and level up.
Master my negative energy mind. Rip up my hair just to see what's inside. I got my blade and my witch at my side. Astral projections are ruining my life because I cannot
vomit up. My mama's talking and drum it up. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up. Hop on my coffin and level up.
And it's vomit up. My mama's talking and drum it up. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up. Hop on my coffin and level up.
Master my negative energy mind. Rip out my hair just to see what's inside. I got my blade and my witch at my side. Astral projections are ruining my life because I cannot focus on anything else in my life. Never let knuckles up high. Spinning her mouth while she looks in my eyes. I am controlling the mind. Hey, what's up? Fake fuck. I got blades, truck, warlords, mohawks, warlock. Hey, what's up? Say what's up.
Hawking this vomit up. My mama's talking and drum it up. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up. Hop on my coffin and level up.
Hawking this vomit up. My mama's talking and drum it up. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up. Hop on my coffin and level up.
And it's vomit up. My mama's talking and drum it up. Call my hoe, she gonna clean it up. Cannibal, eat it up. Hop on my coffin and level up.
Master my negative energy mind. Rip out my hair just to see what's inside.